Hello, BookTube. I've got a poem for you today and a little side eye from the bean. Once again, we're drawing from this old anthology, which is ironically called The New Poetry. It's from the 1930s. I found it in a little free library. I've been making a huge amount of use out of it. I'm in love with this thing now. It has a student's pencil annotations all throughout, and some student put this cover on it for their class. Years and years, decades after the book first came out, someone got it and put this cover on it. And then years and years later, it sat forever. It's in perfect condition. It sat forever and then ended up in a little free library. No idea how. I'm sure that the story would be as fascinating as any novel, at least for a bookworm. But I broke out my Eat, Sleep, Read bookmark, and I have been going through this thing, and I've got a poem for you today. And for once, I can say that the poet is not completely forgotten, although she has not received anything like the attention that she deserves. The poet is Amy Lowell, who was a star in her day. Like a lot of the poets that we've been talking about, she was much sought after to give readings, much sought after to write prefaces or essays for magazines, that sort of thing. She was a celebrity as a poet. She was from the Lowells, the Boston Brahmin family. So she had no need to work. She could devote herself to the arts. And she was a fascinating figure. There have been a couple of biographies of her. The poet Horace Gregory, who did my favorite translation into English of Ovid's Metamorphoses, did a very good profile of her 70 years ago, 60 years ago, something like that. And she was also really good at anything that she turned her pen to. She wrote an enormous 2-volume biography of John Keats that's well worth reading. It crops up at the Brattle Bookshop here in Boston from time to time. And I've read it. I've had it from time to time. I don't have a copy now. But I'm always tempted because it's such a delightful reading experience. She was a really good poet. Her poetry styles are largely gone now. Her poetry school is largely forgotten now. She is largely forgotten now as a poet, as a social figure of any kind. But at least she had a little bit more parlance than a lot of the names that we've been coming up with from this anthology. And this anthology does have famous poets in it. A number of you have been emailing me saying there's all people who've died, whose reputations have died. And no, there are some famous poets in here. We'll get to some of them. But first I want to read you a lovely poem of hers called The Garden by Moonlight. A black cat among roses, phlox, lilac misted under a first quarter moon, the sweet smells of heliotrope and night-scented stock. The garden is very still. It is dazed with moonlight. Contented with perfume, dreaming the opium dreams of its folded poppies. Firefly lights open and vanish, high as the tip buds of the golden glow, low as the sweet asilium flowers at my feet. Moon shimmer on leaves and trellises, moon spikes shafting through the snowball bush. Only the little faces of the ladies' delight are alert and staring. Only the cat, padding between the roses, shakes a branch and breaks the checkered pattern as water is broken by the falling of a leaf. Then you come. And you are quiet like the garden, and white like the asylum flowers, and beautiful as the silent sparks of the fireflies. Ah, beloved, do you see those orange lilies? They knew my mother. But who belonging to me will they know when I am gone? Who belonging to me will they know when I am gone? They knew my mother. That is so lovely. This is such a lovely poem. It's full of avid gardener terminology, lots and lots of names of different plants that work well as terms in the poem, whether you know that they're the names of plants or not, which is the genius of the poet. But they also work really well if you do, to plant you in the garden, to make you see what the author is reminiscing on here. And then there's that totally anonymous entry at the end. Who is it? Who is it who comes to the garden? It's not the cat. Someone comes, and the poet loves them. But oddly, it pivots right from there, right at that moment, after such gorgeous evocations of the natural realm, of the garden realm at Moonlight. If someone entered that scene, you would expect that the pivot would be to love, right? And instead, it's to loss, it's to death. The final lines are, you are quiet like the garden, you are white like the Elysium flowers, and beautiful like the silent sparks of the flower fires. That's all calling back earlier parts of the poem. But what follows, the direct address to the beloved, is haunted by death. It comes out of nowhere, I think, unless maybe one of you can show me how it's foreshadowed a little better than I'm seeing. Ah, beloved, do you see those orange lilies? They knew my mother, who's clearly gone. But who belonging to me will they know when I am gone? I don't get that tonal shift. I really like it. I think it works really well. It stops me in a way that, I have to admit, a pivot to love or the secret assignations at night would not have transformed the poem for me in the way that pivot does. But I don't know quite what's on Amy Lowell's mind when she does that. That is a familiar feeling for me when reading this poet. She's very well represented in this book. There are a lot of poems of her. I don't have any collected Amy Lowell. Don't have that John Keats biography. I don't have any biographies of her. But I never end up reading just one of her poems. There's always that lurking hyper intelligence behind them. So that's your poem for today. That is The Garden by Moonlight by Amy Lowell, once greatly celebrated. I wonder if she was a favorite of whoever read this book. I feel sorry if the student who had this book only read what they were assigned to read, and maybe grudgingly at that. I would feel sorry for them if that's true. And I wonder if the original owner of the book, who got it, in 1932, read it and loved it and somehow managed not to annotate it. I'm annotating it. I don't mind at all. I'm annotating it to add to the palimpsest of people who've used this book. But anyway, I'm going to wrap up. That's your poem for today, The Garden by Moonlight. If you have a garden, go out in it by the light of the moon and see if any of this strikes a bell. I just love the image. I am sure that Amy Lowell saw that. And here it is a century later, and it's as living as the moment that she saw it. The cat gently moving among the flowers, disturbing the moonlight. That is just lovely. Anyway, I'm going to wrap this up, but I'll be back. Thank you, BookTube.